Hi, everyone, and welcome once again to another edition of The Extraordinaire Within Me, a great initiative by Kavita Narang. Thanks, Kavita, for joining again. We have an amazing guest today. Why don't we start? You introduce her, and we start our wonderful hour of inspirational conversations.
Awesome. Thank you, Vincenzo. And welcome our very extraordinary guest today, Dr. Bryann Bromley, to the Extraordinaire Within You by AJOG MFM. For all our listeners, new and old, this is our 19th episode already. And, every time we come back, we get to hear so many incredible stories and journeys, which, serve as a platform for global mentorship. And we can't wait to hear today Dr. Bryann's story as well. So Dr. Bromley is a maternal fetal medicine specialist, a professor at Harvard Medical School, and an internationally recognized expert in prenatal diagnosis and fetal imaging. She currently serves as the first vice president of the American Institute of Ultrasound and Medicine, or AIUM, and has mentored countless students, residents, fellows, faculty throughout her career. I've learned so much, a lot about from ultrasound from, Bryann Bromley myself. Through her leadership, research, education, clinical expertise, she's made an enduring impact on the field of MFM. And we are so grateful to have you here with us today, and welcome. And we'd always love to start with gratitude. So Bryann, take it away and tell us anything you're grateful for.
Well, I'm grateful for you having invited me here because I'm not always that insightful a person. And I was taking a walk around the reservoir on Sunday morning thinking, what am I going to say? How did I end up here? And it gave me the opportunity to really reflect on what has been a 40-year career. And I'm very grateful that you asked me to be here because it gave me time to just pause and think.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Thank you. And we're so excited to hear all of those reflections. Thank you. Vince, take it away.
I'll share a gratitude moment from like half an hour ago. Somebody I've known for a long time. I used to take ballroom classes many, many years ago. And the teacher had three girls. And one of them I saw when she was 2-year-old, probably, now it's in her mid-20s, I think. And she said in the last few years she wanted to go to medical school. And, but, again, no medicine in her family, no guidance whatsoever. Long story short, we did some research together. She published a few papers. She took some extra classes after college. And today, about an hour ago, she got into Temple Medical School. I cried because Valentina is one of the hardest working, intelligent person, and kind of, I'm sure it's happened to a lot of time to you, Bryann, as well. When you help somebody like that to really deserve it, you can see the fire. She's going to help medicine, help thousands of patients. It's just everything comes together. So what about you, Kavita? What's your grateful moment?
Wow, that's beautiful. For me, I think, this past weekend was Father's Day. And I think that is something that is still, my family is really far, 10,000 miles away in Thailand. And I don't get to see them very often. But just reflecting on parents, I think that is something I'm so incredibly grateful for. I'm very blessed to have very, very loving parents. And, both of them are still here with me. And, but just that is something that no matter how old you are, I think you are always so grateful. And yeah, so that. So, I think speaking of parents and families, my favorite question to start out, Bryann, is if you could tell us a little bit about your childhood and how that shaped who you are as a person in your career and your very wonderful life.
Oh, thanks for asking. So I was born in the territory of Hawaii in the mid-1950s. And my dad had been there during Pearl Harbor. My mom moved there in 1952. And I was born Bryann Bromley in Honolulu at Kapiolani Maternity Hospital. And I lived there for the first 4 years of my life. And my family was a very, very loving family, but they were ideologically polarized, right? So my dad was a very successful businessman. He liked to make money. He liked to play the currency markets. He was a businessman, right? He was a capitalist. And my mother was an artist and a socialist and a person of ideas and a thinker. So they were very disparate. So by the time I was 4 years old, their marriage came apart. Having said that, they're both superhumans, right? And they really wanted the best for my little sister and I. So my dad, who was an international businessman, had moved to Europe, particularly Berlin. And so at 4 years old, my mother, as a single woman, moves to Berlin. And she has these two little girls there. And you know what was happening in 1960 with the wall and so forth, a lot of bombed out buildings. And so it was very gray and kind of depressing. And we honestly spent the next 6 years moving around Europe. We lived in Mallorca for 6 months, where she illustrated a children's book with a friend. We moved to Paris because I had to start school. And oh yeah, she enrolled me in French public school. Never mind, I didn't speak English, but I went deuxième, onzième, and dixième within the French system. And they thought I was shy. There are many things I am. Shy is not one of them, but I didn't speak the language. And then, we went for a holiday in a little tiny Austrian town called Westendorf in Tyrol. Beautiful skiing. She decided we were having so much fun that we stayed at what was really a bed and breakfast. And we finished out the year in Austrian school, which was German speaking. Never mind, we didn't speak German. We just went to school a half day and didn't do so well, but we skied really well. And ultimately, we went back to visit her parents, my grandparents, and thought, we should go back to Hawaii and see our friends. And she remembered that she loved Hawaii so much that that should be our home. So we didn't look back. We didn't say goodbye. We just started, the next elementary year in Honolulu. And most of my upbringing was sort of this very strange polarization between a bohemian intellectual mother who lived with ideas and not a lot of material things for 9 months a year. And then in the summer, I went to any of the Italian Riviera, Greek Riviera, French Riviera, and to summer camp in Switzerland with all the rich and famous. And that's how I grew up. Then we bring all these clothes back my father had bought for us. And my mother say, you don't need that many, and give them away. So that's how I grew up. And while I was going to sort of older elementary school in Hawaii, my mom, who dropped out of college, went back to college. So there were 3 of us girls going to school together, and we kind of just grew up together that way. So that's sort of a strange upbringing. Nobody in my family is in medicine. My dad is in gaming. He made one-armed bandits and redemption machines. And my mom, as I said, ultimately ended up a professor of fine arts at the University of Hawaii. So there you have it. How I decided to go into medicine, I was always kind of a nurturer. And when we were living in Berlin, I wondered where all the kids in the bombed out buildings had gone, right? Mm-hmm. And so I decided I'd run an orphanage. And then eventually my mom, who was a great mentor when she went back to school, would have these dinner parties for her classmates who were like 15 years younger than she was. And I told someone that, maybe I'd be a nurse. And he said flippantly, why would you be a nurse if you can be a doctor? I thought, that's a good idea. I must have been 11 years old. And I never strayed from that. And I always loved the process of birthing. I think I would have been very happy as a midwife. But because academia was important to my mother, that sort of didn't end up being my pathway. And so, I went to university on the mainland and then moved east for my education and kind of ended up in maternal fetal medicine. How I ended up there? I loved my residency. I had a fabulous vice chair of OB. Do you remember Fred Frigoletto at all?
Of course.
Yeah, so he was just the nicest, warmest person. And I think it was a PGY3, not sure what I was doing. No, I friggin' hated GYN clinics, so I didn't think I wanted to be a generalist. In the hallway, he said, well, what about maternal fetal medicine? I said, that sounds pretty good. No application, no interview, kaboom. I was slotted to be the first not the first, but an MFM fellow the following year. So I had a very easy pathway to where I kind of ended up. but
I
very
don't know if
different.
it's easy or, you made it
Lucky.
easy, but I'm sure there's a lot there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
we
you
can
hear me?
hear you.
Yeah. So a lot there, Bryann. I want to dissect those, 6 minutes or so. There's so much to know. First of all, quick, do you speak any other languages from all that different
Oh, I
background
used
or?
to be quadrilingual. Now I speak French, Spanish. I no longer speak German, but I do have Jewish grandparents, so I understand Yiddish. But
Wow, so you speak
I'm
French and
not
Spanish.
as, yeah, on peut parler
Good
le
for you.
français alors, c'est
Oui,
d'accord.
oui, je parle français un petit peu. Ah, that's
Alors, c'est bon.
great. That's great. Beautiful. I didn't know that. See, another fun fact comes out. And then, so you talked about mainland. When was the first time, you know, so Hawaii, Europe, Hawaii, and then mainland for college or
Well,
for,
my mom went to graduate school in Colorado. So we spent 2
okay.
years in Colorado for her to get her MFA and then went back to Hawaii. And then a lot of people at the time, you were limited a little bit if you were at University of Hawaii. So probably at least half my class went to the continental United States for college, university. So I went to Stanford, and then your eyes open up and you see different things. And I went to medical school in New York City at Cornell a while, and then I came up to Boston at Brigham and Women's Mass General. They combined my second year of residency, and I've stayed here ever since. I mean, I've had such a good life here.
Wow.
And before I forget, thank you for wearing pink glasses and a pink, beautiful jacket there.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you, thank you, thank you. It's a big honor. It's a big honor.
Oh, that's one of my fun things. I have glasses, all kinds of colors. You should see Pride Month. I'm wearing yellow and stripes. It gives me pleasure, right?
I love that. Honestly, I think it just totally matches how colorful your upbringing was, and that influence of art from your mom and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're so right. Like I feel like every time I see you, it's like these nice bright glasses, or you have your beautiful scarves. I'm always like looking at, oh, what does she have on today? It's lovely. When you look back at, and you kind of highlighted a little bit that, part of Germany wanting to, help people, was that the first time that you kind of felt like drawn to medicine. And then was there anything specific that drew you to OB, or maternal fetal medicine?
Yeah, when I was in college, I volunteered, as part of everything people did at a community health center called Our Health Center. And it was a very grassroots community organization. And even as an undergraduate, I was able to take histories, be involved. And what was supposed to be once or twice a week became almost every night that I would work there. And then I don't even know, I didn't run. Somehow I ended up on their board of directors as a student representative.
Wow.
And I just really was fascinated and supportive of women and women's healthcare. For me, it was a different time, right? Women held up half the sky was sort of our motto and so forth. So very interested in the birthing process and really OB.
Wow. So if you take, a 30,000 feet view of your life, what would you say are probably 3 pivotal moments that perhaps shaped your career?
I would say the first was the gentleman. His name was Richard Baca. I remember that so clearly. When I was like 10 or 11 years old, who said, "Oh, why don't you be a doctor?" Like nobody had ever said that to me before. And I said, "Oh, as I said, good idea." And I never looked back. So that was one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that working at Our Health Center and being involved with women and women's healthcare was probably the second one. And then once I was in residency, I knew I just loved obstetrics and I loved the whole birthing situation. I honestly sometimes was jealous of the midwives because they had the most beautiful deliveries. And I was like knee deep in blood and doing sections at 5 a.m. and thinking, did I make a mistake here? Would I have been happier? But I loved it. So, and then probably where I ended up now was very fortuitous. In my second year of first year fellowship, we did 1 day of ultrasound a week. And back in those days, 90% of obstetrical ultrasound was done by radiologists. So, you know, you had your level 1, you had your level 2, but OBs didn't do it, and MFMs rarely did it. I mean, there's still people that I was very close with in my faculty who are recently retired who never were trained to do ultrasound. And I had this amazing mentor, Beryl Benassaraf, who was a radiologist, right? She was Dr. Nuchal Fold. She was an incredible human. And I spent 1 day a week with her, but I wasn't particularly good at ultrasound. It didn't make my heart pitter patter, but it was an important skill. And then when I finished, you know, I stayed at Brigham and Women's. And of course, they're always looking at new faculty, young faculty to start new programs. And Dr. Frigoletto wanted to be really on the vanguard, where they created an ultrasound unit that was half radiology and half MFM. And Dr. Benassaraf and I think it was Dr. Peter Duboulay were the two heads, Beryl representing OB, even though she was a radiologist, and Peter representing radiology. And I was one of the fresh young people out. I didn't have a niche. I mean, somebody was doing diabetes, somebody was doing hypertension, somebody was doing RH disease, somebody was doing preterm labor. So there was not a niche for me. I think I would have loved to have been a laborist, but that wasn't kind of a thing when I was just finishing. And they said, oh, you get along with Dr. Benassaraf. Why don't you do ultrasound? I thought, oh, awesome. Okay, I will. And then I fell in love with it. You know, I fell in love with the visual pleasure. I fell in love with diagnosis. I fell in love with trying to figure out problems. It was just how, you know, it was a great opportunity for me. And I was blessed to have a phenomenal mentor professionally.
I love that. And if I may expand on that a little bit, because, you know, that decision that may have seemed seemingly small in that moment essentially shaped your whole career and what you've come to do and impact globally, you know. And if you can expand on the mindset that because you mentioned when you first did ultrasound, it didn't make your heart pitter patter, you know, and you wasn't. So how does one person that, you know, you put in that experience, but you decide, I'm going to take this on anyway and run with it. And then, but if you had not done that, your life would have probably been completely different. So, you know, I think just for younger generation, because a lot of times I think we feel like, oh, you have to feel that passion. You got to fall in love with it to proceed it. But in yours, it's a very different pathway that it started. So can you expand a little bit on that mindset?
Yeah,
I think
it was very different. You know, I wanted to move up the academic ladder, and Beryl was the best mentor to do that with. And she was incredibly engaging. She was a one-woman, you know, amazing source of energy. And she had managed to write the Nuchal Fold, the short femur, all these other papers based primarily on a private practice, right? So we were scanning all these patients doing, at that time, you know, when I started, there was no prenatal screening for aneuploidy other than maternal age. We didn't have AFP till 1984. And then we got the triple and the quad after that. So during my whole early residency and attendinghood, we were trying to figure out markers to determine what might be associated with an increased risk of trisomy 21. And we would line up 20 ladies Tuesdays and Friday mornings. That was the max we wanted to do. Actually, we'd do 15 with one doctor. Probably did them from 7:30 to 8:45. I mean, drop needle, drop needle, drop needle. And then we'd look at the fetuses and look at the chromosomal results. And that was all in our private practice. That was not at the hospital. But then we had a good enough database that we could really scour our own database and then write these papers that we wrote. I'm very proud of that private practice. I'm a partner now and have been since 1994. We are on over 329,000 patients, and that's not individual scans. So Beryl started us in 1982. I joined her in 87, 88. And that's how many patients we've seen. So still our private practice is the biggest database that we publish all our material with.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
so
is
we
so
are just lucky. But it came with a price, right? So I would tell younger people, you have to figure out what you want, because Beryl was very strict. And, you say, how did you engage in that? Well, I could have said no, but it wasn't totally an option, right? Dr. Frigoletto wanted me to do it. And it's, yes, sir, I'll do it, right? This is not when you negotiate back in those days. So that's number one. The second thing is that Beryl said we couldn't take labor floor call the night before we scanned. So for almost 3 years, I took all my call on Friday nights or Saturdays. And same with my other partner, Tom Shipp, who's still with me. He's actually covering for me this moment. And then I was so tired at night, I couldn't work. But Beryl had us come to her apartment every weekend. Mine was Sunday afternoons. I had a special babysitter if my husband couldn't watch my kids. And I went to work at her apartment every Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
And if she gave you a database or we came up with an idea, if you didn't write that paper or have it started in 24 hours, she would finish it and put your name first. So you felt terrible. So, we kind of turned things over really quickly, but I'm not sure that's the right thing for everybody in all circumstances, because it was a different world back then, right? There were no hour limitations. There was, it was just different, right?
Wow. Sorry, Vince, we can't hear you.
I hear you, Vincenzo.
Yeah, I think you just. Sorry, Vince, we still can't hear you. Yeah, but if you keep, I know that sometimes you keep talking, your mic usually will just click in a little. Yeah. Now you're back. Yes.
Here we go. I don't know why there's this delay. I apologize, but Bryann, I love what you say. Then I would say, like I said in other parts of the series, no luck there. You saw a wonderful opportunity. Beryl was a wonderful mentor, and it was something that fit you despite the work and weekends and nights, etc. And so all the kudos to you. And I think people should understand that part as well, that you saw an opportunity and you had the skills and the capacity and the hard work that,
So I would say I would take a little bit of exception to that. I would say hard work beats talent unless talent works hard. Somebody has said that before.
Yeah.
And I felt I was a reasonable imager. I was a good imager. I was not like Beryl, who could see things. I mean, I was a list person. Like, I had a protocol and I was dogged. I was not going to leave that room until I saw everything. But it wasn't like I had any special talent. I just was.
But another thing is that I think Beryl probably saw the drive you have that is so manifest in this first 23 minutes. So this thing, that you're pouring through in terms of, how much you like what you do and you grew into it and you're passionate about. Where does that come from? You talked about the bohemian mother. You talked about the capitalistic father.
Oh my God. Do you really want to know? So
genetics versus nurture. I don't know.
Genetics. My sister and I are both workaholics. My dad
passed
away at the age of 90. He was in Switzerland at the time, meeting with his bankers, and he had just had lunch and was going to go to the theater with his girlfriend when he had some event, and he passed away. But he worked till the day he died.
Wow.
And my mother passed away 6 months ago, and a year before her death, she had a one-woman show at the Honolulu Museum of Fine Arts. She had her quote-unquote end-of-life show at about age 80 or 82, I can't remember. And her last show she entitled At the Edge of Forever. And she had 5 beautiful pieces that she did, including works that she finished during COVID. And her biggest sadness in the last year of her life is she wasn't spending as much time at her studio. So she worked as an artist basically until she passed as well.
So you're homozygous from genes from both mother and father in terms of the genetic drive, plus you got the nurture from seeing both of your parents doing completely different things in medicine, but being very engaged or working very hard. And it's a common, common things we've seen. Another thing I want to come back to is, or at least comment on, is that I've been impressed, Bryann, how many of our colleagues at MFM were born somewhere else, have very difficult sometimes, upbringing. And I was like, okay, finally we're interviewing somebody, born in the USA and this and that. But now that we know more about you, again, you were in an island, spent some many years in Europe. You also had a very, different than like a all-American mainland kind of, growing up. Interesting.
Right. I had a very different upbringing, which is totally fun. Bohemian versus, business and,
right.
What can I say? That was but my parents were very friendly and very supportive of each other. And, the only fight they had is when my mom wanted me to go to high school in Hawaii and my dad wanted me to go to Swiss finishing school or something like that. And my mom said, I'm the mother. She's staying here and she's going to high school here.
It worked out. It all worked out.
It did.
No, that's so amazing. And can so your career, I know a lot, I've heard you talk, before too, and I love you always kind of make the statement that you're MFM by training, but radiologist kind of by profession in lots of ways with the, doing a lot of the ultrasound. That's such a unique career path. And, for a lot of the younger MFMs, like, can you talk about that courage and mindset to step into something completely different that can, and take on that? And how do you even learn a skill that, like you said, when you were in residency, ultrasound wasn't much of a thing? Like, how do you develop the skill and say, hey, I didn't get trained in that, but I'm going to become the world expert in this,
Yeah. I think it is organic in my case. So we started off with this huge OB practice in the late 80s, early 90s. And then we had all the anomalies from New England coming in. We saw so many major abnormalities. And that was back when diagnostic testing was basically karyotype. You didn't have to there was nothing else to be done, right? And then gradually, I have to say, Children's Hospital opened their advanced fetal care center, which is what they called it originally. And more of the anomalies would go directly to them, or we'd scan them and they'd go to them. And we would lose them because, they needed to see clinical MFM. They needed to see all the sort of postnatal specialists and so forth. And while originally we had private relationships with surgeons and so forth, at some point we were outcompeted, really. So in order to pay the rent, what do? You start doing GYN. And then the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute started using us. And then all the fertility practices in the city use us. So that personally, I do more sonohistograms and hycoses for subfertility than I do genetic diagnostic testing, because that's what people want. That's what pays the rent. And it's also exciting because now all of a sudden you have a niche, right? So about 6 months ago, we got a second opinion and I kind of rolled my eyes. We do a lot of early anatomy scanning, which is where, we see only somehow in private practice, we get they do their cell-free DNA at 10 weeks. It's normal. They come to us and all of a sudden we find something. That's most of our anomalies that we're finding. But we got a second opinion for our local hospital, complex adnexal mass. And I'm going, what? You didn't probe her? You didn't look at it? All of a sudden you become the expert to know the difference between a dermoid or a decidualized endometrioma in that case. And you sort of say, okay, I think this is okay. Let's watch it and so forth. So you end up, or somebody says, oh, it's a fecal DNA. That's a mucinous adenoma. I know it because of its size, its multilocular appearance, it's unilateral, blah, blah, blah. But you end up having a niche where previously it was genetic sonography that people would come to us for counseling. Now it's GYN and adnexal masses. Maybe they don't want a MRI. And more recently, the MRI says correlate with ultrasound. So here we are. But it's still fun, right? It's still a puzzle, and it's still people who are so grateful to you. I mean, I can't tell you how many people with hemorrhagic cysts come in. Sure, they're dying and they have cancer, only to see it resolve. And you're going, no, that was a hemorrhagic cyst. You're okay. So, it's fun. And I have a great team.
Yeah, it sounds like you lean towards any opportunities to grow, to learn new things. And I think that kind of seems like where all the magic happens. Yeah, you keep growing.
Pay the rent. That would be the option. No, I really do. I mean, we have lots of fun things we do. And, I have a great team. Tom Shipp, Sarah Lassie, Vet Grossman, who's now very internationally recognized in deep endometriosis. Yeah. I mean, we have lots of places to explore.
No.
Yeah. If I can make a comment as well, maybe it would be good for our young listeners to hear from you, Bryann, this issue about private, versus academia, university, which is really, to me, many times the same thing. Like, you're the perfect example of somebody who's very academic, publishes, presents at the best academic, international meetings. So it's what you make of it. It's not really, the label. I don't know if you want to expand, what your take on it. You're at Harvard, what's more academic than that?
I scan at the hospital 1 day a week. I absolutely love it because it's a very different patient population than I see in my private practice. But our biggest database is here because we see more patients. Up until recently, we were doing 100 patients a day. So now we have a little change in our referral pattern, and I'm sure we'll get back to that. But you see the patients. If you have the patients, you have the data set. And the only thing that's different is you have no limitations, right? So, for example, one of our publications on first trimester anatomy, how do you get a statistician? You go to BU graduate school and you put up a notice, I need a statistician. And you pay them from the revenues of your practice. I mean, you need people to insert data. Sonographers, do you want to work overtime? Do you want to look into data? You just use what you have available to you. Private, academic, I don't think makes a big difference because I think we're all the same now. I think in the olden days it probably made more of a difference, but not now.
Yeah.
I just think people have to, one of the things that I feel very proud of is I'm trying to, though, change the culture of how people work within our field. And part of that is I have 3 kids. I never had a glass ceiling. People talk about the glass ceiling, never felt it or perceived it. What I did feel, though, is something I've heard people refer to as the sticky floor. And that's because if you don't want to work on weekends, and there was a time that I didn't because I had kids doing activities. I had a daughter who was a U.S. swimmer, blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't want to spend all the time working. And so I made a choice actually at the level of associate professor that I was not going up to full professor. It wasn't worth it to me. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be international. I didn't want to miss the swim meets. I didn't want to miss the rowing tournaments or the fencing tournaments or the music, recitals. And I just stopped. Not stopped, but I really slowed down. And then, because it wasn't my priority. And then when my youngest one turned about 16 and had his driver's license and didn't want to see me too much anymore, I said, how am I going to fill this vacuum? The other 2 were in college. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to doing some academics. And I remember talking to the department chair at one point. He says, well, you can do academics again, but what happened to your productivity over the last 15 years? I said, 3 children and choices. And then I just worked really hard because all of a sudden getting back on that ladder was important to me because I had areas I wanted to study, right? First trimester was just coming out and I thought, oh, this is such an incredible area to explore. And so I got back on the horse, so to speak. And I don't know, maybe 8 years later, maybe less than that, he said, well, you have to write at least 5 or 6 papers. I said, okay, I can do that. And then, moved on up.
I love that.
I love teaching, and I love mentoring, and I love trying to make women in medicine and MFM have better lives. I mean, I don't think that it has to be the way it was when we were younger. I think that you can balance things a little bit better. Like, I want them to go to their kids' performances. I want to cross-cover school vacation week. I don't want them to have to fight for anything like that we had to take. I mean, I understand if you have a whole bunch of people with kids, but it was seniority got priority. And I don't believe in that. I believe that for the greater good of our field, people who really need it or should have it.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think a lot of people need to hear that, like women, and especially I think some men too, because, I think in today's world, there are some men as well that kind of become primary caretakers too, but especially women. I think so important to hear that it is okay to take a step back, rearrange your priorities, and you can still come back in the game and be extremely successful, just like you are, like a prime example of that. And I think that is so beautiful. And I think the way you've structured your life allowed your cup to be filled through the whole way, rather than burning yourself out on both ends halfway through. I think that is so critical. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And I didn't even say, oh, I'll come back to it later. I said, I don't want to do this. This is not worth it to me. And it's my husband who says, well, you have nothing. I'm depressed. I don't have a kid. I have a dog. I have a cat. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, start doing research again. Start teaching more. I said, oh, okay.
Wow. I love that. But it looks like you were going to say something. Sorry.
No. It's beautiful. And I'm thinking of asking you, Bryann, maybe what are you most proud of at home? You kind of touched on it, and what you're most proud of at work, looking back 40 years, 3 kids, what are the things that you can pass on again to a young audience and say, I'm so glad I did this at home. I'm so glad I did this, with my work.
I think from the 30,000-foot view, I would say you can do it all, but you can't do it all at the same time. You have to, every time you're writing a paper and getting something published, it's something else. It's a swim meet you haven't watched. It's a fencing tournament you haven't seen. So it's always about choice. And you have to be honest with yourself as to where you want to be. I would also say that if you have the assets, you need to hire as much help as you can to do the things that are meaningful to you. You shouldn't do anything in your life that doesn't bring you pleasure if you can afford not to. So if you have housekeepers or nannies, and if your kid falls and runs to the nanny, don't feel, it is a knife in the heart, but remember that when you're not there, they're being loved and taken care of. So I think you get as much help as you can. You decide what's important for you, and you alternate, between work and home. So for work, I would say 3 things. Work is always a challenge. So when we started genetic sonography, I don't know if you know this, the whole idea was to find these markers that would help us identify fetuses with Down syndrome, right? That's not what the patients wanted. You know what the patients wanted? They wanted to know the absence of marker would decrease their risk so that they could avoid diagnostic testing. And it was sort of a really eye-opening to me that we started out on this one track, but ended up being most useful on another track. So that's sort of, those conversations were very meaningful to me. I think the other thing is, and Beryl really did this, we really promoted advanced practice sonographers. We feel that people should practice to the highest level of their competency, right? And so back in 2003, we had advanced practice sonographers. and we still do. We could not run our private practice. We have 4 of them, and they're physician extenders, and they help us do everything we do. And I'm really proud of that, and hoping to move them forward, that so that at one point there will really be a legitimate classification for advanced practice sonographers, so that they can make money, they can be recognized as a specialized certificate. And I don't even see how they couldn't become essentially independent practitioners, because they scan better than most MFMs at this point, as far as, my experience. And the third thing is trying to help younger women with children take advantage of downtime to be with their kids. Like, if you have enough people that they don't have to be there at 7 or 7:30, let them come in at 8. And one of my nicest things that I saw this week is one of my younger MFMs let our resident come in a half hour later, because we weren't starting with OB until 8 a.m. And that let her have her chance to say good morning to her kids, even if she couldn't take them to school. And I think I'm very proud to see somebody that I enable the next gen. And that's really meaningful to me professionally. Home is a little bit challenging, I have to say. I have a great husband. I have great kids. Kids are a challenge. But they're all moving forward now. They're all in the arts. My oldest is a composer. My second is a graduate. Well, she's a graduate student in art history and a social activist. She's very much into community art and art as a political discourse. Right. And you're going to laugh at this, Kavita. My youngest is planning to move to Thailand because he's very much a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fan, wants to start his own fight studio. And apparently Thailand, he spent months there because they have a great fight culture. Great. I'm glad. So I love. Oh my God.
It'll be great. He can go live on the islands, enjoy the slow life, and teach. I think it's an amazing thing. Good luck to him. And I'm always here.
From my overeducated family, I would have somebody who said, nah, I don't like academics. I'm going to go be a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I guess. I don't even know what you call it. I can't watch, they like roll and squish each other. And terrifying.
As long as it makes him happy, right?
100%. That's what I've learned. Happiness is better. I've never sort of said, oh, why don't you want to be a doctor? They'd look at me and say, I don't want to work as hard as you do, but they all work just as hard as I do in their own field. You have to do what you love. So, I mean, even the youngest trains 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'm going, hold on there. You're going to get injured. And he does. So it's pretty different.
I love that. No, that is so amazing. Thanks for sharing that, those words of wisdom. And, it's so beautiful to see how you support I think you've really identified what an important culture is for you at work. And you've really tried to create that, and even in your home space, the culture there is that choose your happiness. And it sounds like you support your kids in that arena so wholeheartedly too. So no matter what they choose, they're going to go all in because they know they feel supported. I think that's a beautiful thing.
I hope so.
Yeah. And so now when you come to work, what is one thing you look forward most to in your everyday?
So I have 2 families, right? I have my biologic family and I have my work family. And I love my partners. They're some of my best friends. So if I'm having a problem at home, I'm telling Tom Shipp, my partner, what the heck my problem is, and he's giving me ideas. So they've become family, they become friends, they're colleagues. Honestly, Tom is one of my best friends. What can I tell you? I love my sonographers. We all go through life. Half of them have been here over 20 years. So we've seen them get married. We've seen them be pregnant. We have a whole cohort now with kids going off to college. And I go, oh my God, we just scanned you. How could you have a kid going to college? But it's like a different family. And, we obviously, like any family, will have our ups and downs. But I love coming to work and seeing them and love taking care of patients and love pursuing as much excellence as we can, how much QA we can do, how much supporting we can do of each other, and how we can take care of patients and really move things forward. So I'm very lucky. Beryl also felt like she had two families, as does Tom, and Sarah will soon. I mean, you have your home family and you have your work family.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to come back to Beryl, actually, Bryann, because the issue of mentorship is so important to Kavita and I. And you obviously been an amazing mentor, but you also grew up under an amazing wing. And I've had the pleasure to interact with Beryl many, many times. You can certainly describe her better than me, but she was the underachiever in her family because I think her uncle, right, was a Nobel Prize winner, and her brother, maybe something like that,
Her
right?
father and her uncle were both Nobel laureates. I think her mother's relative was the Grand Rabbi of Paris. I think she is cousins with Laurent Solomon. They're cousins with each other. I mean, she was a force of nature. She was just an incredible mentor. I'm not a mentor compared to her. I mean, she didn't do the little touchy-feely stuff at all.
But that's what I wanted to you to expand on. Because you can be a mentor many different ways. You know, you can be a mentor, again, touchy-feely, like you just said. My recollection of Beryl is that, as an example, she was an incredible mentor. You know, how, good she was, intelligent, detailed-oriented. Her lectures were, your brain just got twice as big, after 30 minutes of Beryl Benazar's lecture. And how you saw that, how does she mentor you, and what can you pass on to other people who want to be mentors and mentees?
I think she expected excellence, and she expected it right away. So there was no putting off. You didn't sit on data for a week. She wanted it done. She wanted it done right. But the reason Beryl and I worked so well together is she was brilliant. She had the huge view. She had the creativity. She would look at a scan and know exactly what was going on. I was her detail person. So I'm the one who's looking and checking off the things. So we sort of worked really, really well together because of that. But she expected a lot. I mean, Tom Shipp was at her house every Saturday morning and had lunch. So she's working with her young associates for a full day every weekend, and who knows what she was probably working on other stuff in the afternoon. I'm sure she was. She worked all the time, but she was so generous. She never kept anything for herself. She would push us forward. She would give us speaking opportunities. She would give us her idea and say, you write this up. It might not even have been your idea, and she was giving it to you. So she was generous to a fault, academically and even personally, I have to say. I mean, the people she cared about, she just did everything for. I mean, for example, buying into this practice was nothing. We just bought in off the profits that the practice was making. It took us a while to buy in, but it wasn't like we had to come up with money. We just worked.
Beautiful.
She was so generous. We miss her a lot.
I wish, Bryann, we could interview her. I think
oh my God.
Amazing,
yeah. The interesting
person.
thing about Beryl is she was profoundly dyslexic. I don't know if you know that. So when she was the editor of JUM, she just looked at the pictures because she could see like X-ray vision. There's a great article about her in a Bryn Mawr magazine where she went to college, but she could barely read. Barely.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Bryn Mawr is right next to us. I remember that the Lancet made a beautiful piece about her, if people haven't read it, and summarized her amazing achievements. Yeah.
Yeah. She's an incredible person. Just amazing.
Wow, that's amazing. And that really goes to show your power of mentorship, and you become the product of the environment and the people you surround yourself with, and you try to then be that person for the people around you. I think that's all we're always trying to do for each other, right? Inspire the world around us for better.
Well, I think that's how I would think of leadership or success is you don't have to be the sharpest knife in the drawer. You just have to be collaborative with other people and maybe be able to herd cats and tamper down some drama. But really, we're in this all together. And if you have good people, as you say, around you, you learn from them and they make you excited about coming to work every day, right? Because something cool is going to happen.
No, I love that. of that. No, thank you so much. And we are cutting down to the last 10 minutes here, but I want to touch a little bit outside of work. What do you like to do for fun for yourself? I mean, you love ultrasound, and outside of that.
So I knew you were going to ask this question because everybody asks this question. And I think, should I lie or should I tell the truth? So I decided I respect you guys so much. I'm going to tell you the truth. Explain to me how you can have hobbies or do something for fun when you have an academic practice, you have a private practice with 26 employees where you have to keep the lights on, where you have 3 children, some of who have challenges here and there in their lives, and you have aging parents you have to support. Yeah. So I have to tell you, before I started on this journey, I played cello. I like to swim. I went hiking and backpacking in the mountains all the time, sometimes 6 weeks at a time with Outward Bound and National Outdoor Leadership School. And then for 35 years, honestly, it's a good thing I liked work and I liked home because there was nothing else. I mean, the last year of my mom's life, year and a half, I was going to Hawaii from Boston every month or every 2 months to be there for her. So what I look forward to is when I finally retire to bring some new curiosity into my life. There are a bunch of books I want to read. I want to walk. I want to maybe study hula, which is almost a religious art thing. I've never got a chance. I study Hawaiian language, by the way, Vincenzo, which you asked on Duolingo. So I do that 10 minutes every day.
That's great.
But to say I have hobbies, I wish I haven't had time. But I also haven't missed them exactly either. And with my mom passing away, my daughter and I say it's bittersweet because we miss her all the time, every day. But we're not always going back and forth to Honolulu from the East Coast to be with her. So now we have more traveling. She used to be my travel buddy. We can go traveling again and, do fun stuff that whatever we decide to do.
A lot to look forward to, Bryann. And, I love the fact that you cultivated relationships. I think another message from this hour is, your relationships with, your family, your parents, your sonographers and partners and friends, mentors. So, those are, we don't call them hobbies, but that's what makes people happy, and you cultivated that. Let's finish. My last thing I wanted to ask you, maybe it's about your name. Your especially your first name. It's an unusual first name. I know you pronounce it Bryann, but can you tell us a little bit more about your name? Maybe people are.
I was born Bryann, Bryan, straight out, no second N. And my father just liked men's name on women, so my mother's name was Alan. And so, isn't that her name was Alan, but her name was Alan spelled Allyn. It was a combination of her parents' names, Alexander and Evelyn, but pronounced Alan. So he just liked it. And so I was Bryann. And then somewhere in early high school, I got so tired of being put into boys' PE classes or boys Outward Bound, whatever. It was hilarious when it first happened, right? But then everybody's running around. You got the worst locker in the girls' locker room because it's the last one left. You probably had to share with someone. And so I said, this isn't funny. There was no he, him, her on anybody's application for anything. And so I felt like, well, maybe if I put the second N, but then people call me Bryann, Brianna, even Beryl called me the wrong name. But I never correct anybody because I don't care. As long as you're nice to me, I don't mind what you call me.
So nice of you. That's great.
I love that. One question that I always love to ask as well, kind of as we get in closer, if you could describe yourself in one word, what would that be?
One word. Tenacious. Ooh, I'm a junkyard dog. I don't give up.
I love
tenacious.
That. Wow. Yeah. And I think that's really clearly shows how your whole career is fine. I feel like you just show up, and no matter what the situation is, you just show up and you give it your best. That's so
all you can do. You give your best to every situation and every time. And it's not always easy. I remember when my kids were younger, I'd drive home from work. I didn't have anything left. I'd sit in my driveway for 5 to 10 minutes and say, yelling at them, being nasty. That's not their fault that I'm tired. So just take a minute, breathe, and go be the best mom you can be.
Yeah, well done. No, thank you. Sorry, Vince, we can't hear you. Okay, yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I think we're kind of close to the end here. As someone that's an expert in ultrasound, I also just want to take a couple minutes to touch on what do you see as a vision of, how the practice of ultrasound, maternal fetal medicine might change in the next few years, with AI and anything. Any thoughts on that, or any words of wisdom or tidbits on how current learners and students can continue to learn ultrasound well and develop this very important skill for us to take best care of our patients?
I certainly think that obviously AI is burgeoning. My personal opinion, last time I was at AIUM, there were so many new AI companies all looking for making a better image. I think two things. One, if they can really help us get past the obesity epidemic so that we have better penetration, better resolution without having to touch a million knobs, I think that'll be helpful. I also think QA is really important because we are so dependent on who is doing the scan and the quality of images that they get. Or let's say they forget. I mean, maybe you do a scan and the sonographer forgets to get a bladder. I go in, I always look at the cavum, I always look at the posterior fossa, I look at the lips, I look at the hands. I don't always check for a bladder again because I assume there's a good picture of the bladder. And I think QA, making sure that all your images are there. I also think, I don't know what happens in your labs. When I started out with Beryl, we took 18 pictures. That was it. They were film, AGFO, that was all you did, unless there was an anomaly. And then we'd bring in cassettes to Beryl who would take more. 18 pictures. Now I'll have a singleton and they'll have 180 pictures. And I think that productivity can improve with AI to say, okay, you already have this picture. You get a 95% on it. You don't have to get a million more of the same thing. Right. So I think those are going to be important. I think ultrasound at the point of care is going to be really important. How do you put in your, it's already being used extensively there, but.
Yeah.
And I think in other fields other than OBGYN, my God, dermatology, musculoskeletal. I love the labor floor. I have no experience on labor floor ultrasound, but I really think it has the potential of being very useful.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. No, thank you so much. I think that's really, thought-provoking for us to think about how we can continue to utilize, in the coming generations as well. And do you have any final words you want to share with our listeners at all as we wrap up?
If you're doing ultrasound scanning, hold the transducer. You cannot learn ultrasound in the reading room sitting on your Ocoli. Get in there, look, play. Try to get any of a specific image. We always have challenges in our office. We want to get the pulmonary veins. Okay, everybody has to get pulmonary veins. And whoever gets the best picture wins a prize, whether it's an Amazon gift card or if you get a picture I can use in a talk that's talk worthy, and that definitely gets a prize, or if you made a great pickup, you can be tech of the day and get a pin or a sticker.
I love that. No, thank you so much, Dr. Bryann Bromley, for joining us today. I think when you think about a leader, you're truly someone who inspires excellence, and you lead with so much love and kindness. And I think the best part is you make academic medicine fun. Like even just talking about learning ultrasound, I think there's this element of fun you bring to everything you do, and it shows. And I think that just seeing you enjoy what you do also inspires all the learners around you to enjoy the process along with you.
I hope so, because we have a ton of fun.
No, so thank you. Thank you.
Little challenges. Like I got 3, you only have 2. No, I'm kidding. Thanks again, Bryann. My pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the opportunity to reflect because I don't know how I got this old.
No, you're wonderful and inspiration to all of us. Many people share our view, and thanks for sharing so many personal stories. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners. Bye.
Bye.